Welcome to the Explainer. So fasten your seatbelts, because today we're taking a high-speed journey through a literal monumental shift in global history. We're talking about an era of brilliant scholarship, massive city building, technological revolutions, and, well, violent political collapse. This is the epic rise and fall of the Abbasid Caliphate, a dynasty that completely redefined the medieval world and, honestly, whose legacy shaped the very world we live in today.
Okay, let's dive right into this. 500 years, half a millennium. That is how long this single, powerful dynasty held the reins of the Islamic world. They aggressively seized control in the 8th century and held on to their status, through peaks of absolute dominance and deep valleys of chaotic anarchy, right up until the 13th century.
Section 1. The Abbasid Revolution. To understand how they pulled this off, we gotta set the stage. It's the year 750 AD. The previous rulers, the Umayyads, have dominated for about a century, but they've made some serious enemies. Bursting out of the eastern region of Khorasan, the Abbasids sparked this massive, bloody revolution, completely overthrowing the Umayyads and instantly positioning themselves as the new, undisputed masters of the Islamic world. I mean, just look at the sheer scale of the empire they took over around 850 CE. We are talking about a continuous, sprawling super-state stretching all the way from the coasts of the Mediterranean and North Africa, straight across the Middle East, deep into the plains of Iran, and literally all the way to the Indus River. It's just a breathtaking amount of land and people to control. So how exactly do you govern a territory that huge? Well, you consolidate absolute power. The Abbasids completely gutted the old Arabian tribal aristocracy. Instead, they looked east to the legacy of the old Persian kings, replacing the old system with a highly centralized Persian-style despotism. The Caliph, he wasn't just a leader anymore. He ruled by divine right, as God's deputy on earth. And this was backed up by a massive, salaried bureaucracy and a permanent, highly organized military force. They didn't have to persuade you to follow them. They absolutely had the power to make you. Moving on to Section 2. Umayyads versus Abbasids. Because they didn't just change the government structure, they completely rewrote the playbook of the entire Islamic Empire, deliberately pivoting away from everything the Umayyads stood for. Let's do a rapid-fire contrast here to see exactly what changed. The Umayyads? Well, they were focused west on the Mediterranean, ruling from Damascus. They were all about aggressive military expansion, and they largely kept the ruling class pretty exclusive. But the Abbasids, they shifted the entire center of gravity east to the plains of Iran and Iraq, eventually building their capital at Baghdad. They shifted the cultural focus from pure military conquest to a massive expansion of knowledge. And crucially, they exploded their population numbers and influence by actively welcoming non-Arab Muslims and accepting non-Muslims into their societal fold. And that dramatic shift in priorities brings us to Section 3, the Islamic Golden Age. This is the absolute peak of Abbasid power, wealth, and global prestige, a time when their empire was the undisputed center of the world's intellectual universe. If we're going to do a play-by-play of their greatest hits, we absolutely have to start with the legendary reign of Caliph Harun al-Rashid. I mean, he transformed the newly founded round city of Baghdad into the richest, most intellectually advanced, and cosmopolitan metropolis on Earth. He established the House of Wisdom, this legendary grand library and academic center. Baghdad basically became a beacon, drawing in a brilliant, multi-ethnic, and multi-religious population from all across the globe. And this brilliantly illustrates how their ambition was literally written into the blueprints. To accommodate this massive explosion of growth, the Abbasids launched unprecedented infrastructure upgrades. They ingeniously utilized cheap, readily available mud and baked brick, which allowed them to construct vast, monumental architectural complexes. We're talking sprawling palaces, massive administrative centers, and gigantic mosques stretching for dozens of miles in cities like Baghdad and later Samarra. Section 4, Paper, Science, and Trade. Now, a beautiful city is one thing, right? But to truly build a golden age, you need a technological revolution, and the Abbasids had one that quite literally changed human history. It all comes down to their strategic position, sitting squarely atop the Silk Roads, that ancient network linking Europe and Asia. Now sure, this brought them unimaginable wealth in the form of silk, spices, and gems. But the ultimate prize that flowed down those trade routes from China into the Muslim world was something far more valuable. It was the technology of paper making.
See, before paper, scholars had to use parchment, which is made from animal skins.
Listen to how much the 9th century Abbasid scholar al-Jahaz absolutely hated it. He wrote, "Parchment is heavy and cumbersome, is useless if it gets damp, smells worse, is more expensive. If a scholar wished to take with him enough parchment for his journey, a camel load would not suffice." You can just hear how frustrated the guy is. But paper was cheap, it was light, and made from recycled cotton and linen. The adoption of paper utterly revolutionized bookmaking, administration, and the rapid spread of complex ideas. So, why does all this matter to you today? Well, what you should take away from this is that cheap paper fueled a massive, empire-wide translation movement. Abbasid scholars systematically translated and preserved ancient Greek, Persian, and Indian science, mathematics, and philosophy. Without this effort, much of the ancient world's knowledge would have been lost forever. The science and math refined on Abbasid paper eventually found its way to Europe, laying the direct, undeniable groundwork for the European Renaissance. But history is relentless, and no golden age lasts forever. Which brings us to Section 5, Anarchy and Fragmentation. Behind the incredible wealth and scholarship, the political foundations of the Caliphate were beginning to crack. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the visual reality of their political decay. The empire had simply grown too large, way larger than the Roman Empire at its peak. And the limited communication of the 9th century made it basically impossible to control centrally from Baghdad. As a result, the map splinters. Vast provinces broke off, giving rise to autonomous local dynasties who claimed the territory for themselves, which drastically shrank the caliph's actual ruling footprint. Let's blitz right through the causes of this stunning collapse. First, a devastating, decade-long civil war between Harun al-Rashid's own sons depleted the military and shattered stability. Second, an extreme financial crisis hit as autonomous provinces stopped sending tax money to Baghdad. And third, to try and maintain control, the caliphs made the disastrous decision to rely heavily on foreign Turkish Mamluk mercenaries. These military commanders quickly realized they held the real power, eventually turning on the caliphs and reducing the once mighty autocrats to powerless, titular figureheads. I mean, look at how fast this timeline unravels. In 809, the great Harun al-Rashid dies. By 836, the caliphs are so afraid of their own unruly mercenary armies, they flee Baghdad and move the capital to Samarra. By 861, total anarchy breaks out as rival military factions literally murder caliphs to install their own puppets. Fast forward to 945, the Persian Umayyad dynasty simply marches in and takes control of the capital. And finally, the ultimate death blow arrives in 1258, when the invading Mongols utterly destroy Baghdad, officially ending the Abbasid Empire for good. It is an incredibly dramatic, violent end to a dynasty that once held the entire world in its palm. But it leaves us with a fascinating paradox to consider, right? Because despite their total political collapse, their intellectual contributions survived. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I'm going to leave you with this to ponder. Is a civilization's true power measured by its military conquests and political borders, or by the knowledge and enlightenment it leaves behind for the rest of humanity? Think about that for a bit and keep exploring.